Well, so, and actually that is one of our subject matters, which is how do you go down that path? Like being present every moment is one of the keys to moving down that path. But truly, what if you were to, and we could have this, maybe we could consider this as an adjunct or a separate conversation if we want to do that, because just for the convenience of the audience. But if you had somebody who came to you and they were genuinely embodying that will, right? Because you have the tourists, you have those that are seeking the candy, like, like
No,
they're curious,
absolutely.
but it's not, they don't feel it in their heart.
They feel something. I mean, the simple fact that there's a curiosity awakening,
Yeah, but they could be bouncing around from one idea to the next and they just stumbled into your environment. I'm
yeah.
speaking of those who feel the call and even they may have tried to push it away.
The thing is, when you feel the call, you cannot push it away. And even if you try to push it away, life keeps putting you into situations where it's like, look at this.
Right.
And, and then
If
even when you start that journey and you become aware of the transformations that are needed, and actually the further you go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, the greater the transformations, because you become aware, shall we say, the greater of the gravitational force of that black hole of conscious or lack of consciousness that's trying to pull you in, that it's the same, analogically speaking. It's like you have to build yourself like a rocket trying to escape the gravitational force of the planet. And you know that you have to then basically become very strong and very powerful,
okay.
but in an ascending, positive, beneficial,
Joyous. Mhm.
yeah, service to others direction.
Okay. So
That's the hard work, because the easy work is just, take the cheap candy and make the compromises and give into the temptations and slide into the abyss.
okay, so why don't you list off? So this is the scenario. Somebody comes to you and they say, Benedict, I've been listening to your content and I feel as if you could guide me. I'm feeling that call. I try to push it away. It only gets stronger. I'm different from my peers. It took me a while to come to terms with this. My family doesn't really know what I'm talking about most of the time. I don't know why I'm addicted to Eckhart Tolle, whatever the conversation is and how it starts. And they say, could you go and give me a few tips or just a framework for things that I could possibly do that would help accelerate me firmly down that path of the awakened self? And so I'll let you go ahead and give the things that how you would present, and I'll walk through the conversation with you, and then we can flip roles, and I'll do my best to do the same.
Okay, good. Yeah, we can do this as an exercise. Why not? Personally, and this is something, and again, you see, this is also about a point of awakening consciousness that, and I see this very often being imprinted and mapped even into spiritual circles, even into people starting their spiritual journey, that we still have this tendency, which I would say, I don't want to use the term lower consciousness or lower vibration, but let's say immature consciousness, like,
Okay.
where is we try to fit in, right? Basically, we want the safety of the herd. We're looking for a tribe. We're looking for a community, which is very, very good. That's absolutely no problem, because that's also supportive and beneficial. But I've seen it a number of times where, and then you talk about things, spiritual ego, spiritual bypassing, various kind of things, where actually, rather than actually somebody really feeling to themselves. So, for example, the guy who comes, or the person who comes, the woman who comes, who's super inspired by Eckhart Tolle, let's say, then okay, there's your starting point. What is it there? What happened, and how does it connect specifically to your life? What is the area of your life now that's become very, very big and important? Is it your health? Is it a feeling of depression? Is it problems with relationships? Is it lack of energy? Where is the suffering, first of all?
Yeah.
Because
So in this
generally,
scenario,
generally, people have started this journey because something is missing. They've become aware that something is missing. or something has decayed in life.
They've always felt different and they feel a little dead inside. Their 9 to 5 isn't quite doing it for them anymore.
Yeah,
The collective consciousness somewhat bores them. They're not gravitating to the same entertainment or exploration or adventures that their peers are. They don't
absolutely.
carry the same materialistic desires.
Yeah.
And they're finding themselves increasingly seeking stillness, connection to nature, and communion with like-minded people.
Yeah. And you see, this is the first step. The first step is to have the courage to be you, to be different, to not fit into that collective consciousness that doesn't resonate with you anymore. And that's why you also have to say, okay, but what is it that interests me right now? It might be that as you explore those things, you'll discover more and more things that interest you, or you'll realize actually this only takes me so far. But your journey is actually your life, it's your path. Now, there's practices, there's teachings, there are many techniques that can be offered at various stages of the journey to help overcome obstacles or help to build a good structure, a good routine that can work upon various different levels of consciousness. Um, and you can give a whole range of these. I mean, there are thousands. I mean, if you look in the yoga tradition, there's something like 3 million different yoga postures, asanas, right? Now, who's got time to practice 3 million postures?
It's going to take a long
Why
time
are
to
the 3
learn all
million
those
postures? Some
postures.
of them, hardly differ. But the
Well,
thing is,
when you got 3 million, you're going to get some overlap.
yeah, of course you're going to get some overlap, and and the thing is that, and you don't need that many. You can essentialize that down into a smaller number that work upon the various levels of consciousness. But you see, the thing is that anybody who comes is looking for something, but the truth is that nobody walks the path for you. Nobody takes the journey for you because the journey is a journey of self-knowledge.
Okay, so you're saying step one is to grow comfortable with the uniqueness of you.
Absolutely. And and in the same time, or maybe as a secondary phase of that, is then no longer feel threatened by the difference or uniqueness of others. So because in the beginning, we're very, very threatened by the differences, which is why we create all kinds of false images and false patterns to fit in, to be part of the human race, to be part of the Instagram crowd, to be
Sure.
part of the Facebook crowd, to be part of our local community, our pizza lover eaters, our whatever,
Yeah, which is part of the identities.
yeah, we reinforce the false identity by an association. Now, it might be that those things we do give us pleasure. Absolutely, that's no problem. That's absolutely no problem. And we don't need to reject the things that we feel that are connected to us. So if we enjoy, let's say we're part of a cycling club and we enjoy cycling, it's part of the life that brings us joy, then continue to embrace it.
Right.
So you have to start to live a life that's become more and more authentic to yourself, to say, learn to say no, to actually hang on, no, I don't want to drink and take drugs and wake up wasted and exhausted at the end of a ridiculous weekend. Maybe it was fun when I was a bit younger a few times, but now it's reaching a point where I don't feel the benefits of this. And it's the same with other things. I don't feel the benefits in engaging in these types of conversations or of indulging in eating junk food.
Okay. So
Right
then,
now, you still love a good hamburger. That's okay. That's
okay.
also okay. The thing is, this is the teachings from Yogananda that was basically saying this, that in any state of spiritual awakening, any spiritual teachings, any spiritual practices don't mean that you have to give up your life as it is now. But as you progress on the journey into self-knowledge and you become more and more authentic in knowing yourself and creating the routine and style of life, let's say, that supports your journey, you may well find that some of the bad habits you had before no longer have any place. and you'll give them up in the right moment. But that will be, down to you and down to the transformations, or shall we say, steps that you've made on your journey.
Okay, so just to recap a little bit, so you're going to guide them into growing comfortable with who they are,
Yeah.
right? Recognizing the uniqueness of their journey, beginning to grow aware of the identities which would otherwise have them locked into a false self, if you will, which is more of the collective self or maybe the convenient self that's developed over the years. And then it sounds like the advice then would be looking at the vibrational consequences of their actions oriented around maybe food or alcohol or some other social activity, as well as the company that they're keeping and the vibration they're in within that environment. Right? Am I recapping it
Yeah,
well?
it is pretty much. You see, this is the thing. It's you start with everything. It's basically how do you nourish your life? What are the elements of your life that are bringing nourishment and enrichment? And where is the things where it's just creating decay, sadness, depression, and why is that? And why are you still, it's like that kind of thing. Why are you still doing that, expecting a different result?
Yeah. Or is this in your highest and greatest good? Is this
Is it in your
truly,
highest and greatest good? And if right now you don't necessarily have the capacity right now to get rid of it all, that's okay. Slow, steady steps. You see, this is also the point. Sometimes people go like, "I don't want that." Is reject everything, push it all away. I don't want that. I don't want this world. I don't want this life. I don't want this job. And it's like, okay, but much better to start from what you do have and what you do like, and put your focus into that.
I agree. I
You
agree.
know,
And oftentimes you don't really know who you're going to become as you move down this path. And so part of it is allowing the false self to drop away as it's ready to, and allowing the new identity or the new self, which is the non identified, but the new way of being, to materialize on its own timeline as
And
it's.
in a way, that's the next stage of the journey where you also start to embrace gratitude, where you kind of like you become grateful for everything that is, everything you appreciate, everything that's beneficial, everything that's enriching in your life.
Yeah.
And you also embrace in gratitude the things that you've become aware of like, I need to let go of these things.
Yeah.
Because
Because these,
also, until we start to let go of the things that no longer serve us, we don't make space for any new growth. There has to be a pruning process, right?
generally, yes. And usually that comes, in my experience, it comes with the aid of another bringing awareness in that capacity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because self cannot see self.
No, we can't. I mean, it's the
I
same
mean,
thing.
not until we reach such a phenomenal point of enlightenment, which is to say that self has already been conquered,
Yeah.
and then we can see the remnants of it.
Yeah.
But in the midst of this transformation that you're speaking of, that individual who's carrying low vibrational tendencies, those tendencies are very entrenched usually and very well guarded and protected.
Absolutely. And this is why, for example, you walk into a room full of people, or you walk down a busy street in the city, there is only one head you don't see.
Yeah, truly. It's
And
interesting,
that
right?
and that's your own. You never see your own head until it's shown in a reflection.
Well, ironically, you can see everybody else so clearly, and your mind will create an opinion or a judgment of everybody that walks by.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
all the while, you're not even aware of your own presentation most of
And
the
you're
time.
just creating the illusion and
Or worse, you think yourself to be superior because you're in that state of well presentation, and somehow or another you're judging them, and that's allowing you to feel elevated
yeah, you can elevate yourself or you can denigrate yourself. You can also walk down there
and
and
say,
create
"Wow,
create the negative
they're
story
so
as
much more
well.
beautiful than I am. Look at how nicely presented they are. Why can't I be like that?"
And you see that actually here is one of the paradigms of the false identity or the ego identity, which is constantly creating those illusory stories that we identify with.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're endless. They're very creative. So I'll give you mine. I'll give you mine.
Yeah,
Mine actually, they're very similar. They're very. I mean, this is ad hoc, right? We're just kind of we're just waxing lyrical off the cuff here, and so you can walk me through it if you'd like, with the same scenario where that young seeker arrives in my space and says, "Okay, Alan, you seem to be it looks like you're figuring shit out. Like it looks like you're moving down the right path. What would you what would you say to me?" Like and um I think my first step would be to find yourself in the company of a purity signal, which is, if possible, it's that old guru yogi model that was so
Mhm.
well perfected in India for so many thousands of years, which is if possible, to forge a relationship with somebody who's already ahead on their journey, who
Yeah.
is embodying that purity. And it operates on two levels. One is I don't know if you've ever seen the tuning forks when you have like
Hmm.
one stationary tuning fork and then they hit the other tuning fork and it just comes into proximity, and the first tuning fork that was just stationary now starts to vibrate at the same frequency.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
how we operate.
that's exactly how we operate. Yeah,
And so if you're relatively early in your path and you're seeking to raise your vibration, one of the most important necessary ways to strengthen your source connection to embody more of your light is to come into proximity of a high vibrational being.
absolutely. And just to add to that, it's actually, how to say, a spiritual truth, a spiritual saying that if you want to know the, shall we say, the degree of spiritual awakening or how far someone has progressed on the spiritual journey, look at the people they surround themselves with.
Bingo. And actually, it doesn't necessarily mean on a spiritual journey. It's actually in life.
In life,
You can
yeah,
measure somebody's vibration
yeah,
by the company they keep.
by the company they keep.
Yeah.
As you say, birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah. And so for that young disciple, I think, and it's rare, but in these times, it's rare and it's not rare. So it's not so easy, and especially in the Western world, to be like, oh, I found like, my purity signal. I found somebody who is of a very high vibration that I can just keep company with. And yet at the same time, there are incarnates who have dropped on planet operating in every major language that have created virtual purification spaces.
Yeah,
And there are many people who subscribe to their various platforms. It's not nearly as powerful as actually being like shoulder to shoulder with somebody, but there is quite a bit of benefit just to having that frequency wash over you.
absolutely. Because we have a nature that's emissive and receptive. We're formed from yang and yin energies. Everything, this polarity, this duality that exists, and if we go into a certain environment, and of course, again, it comes down to our level of awareness. But the more aware we are, actually, the harder it is to go into a low vibration environment because we feel immediately the drop in the
Well,
level,
or
the
if
gravitational
it,
effects, and we're like, oh, here's the big difference.
trust me, if I'm in the company of somebody who I'm not supposed to be in the company of, I'm toast. I am just wiped out.
Yeah.
I feel it so profoundly, and sometimes it carries all day and into the night. It takes me a while to rebound.
Absolutely. And, sometimes that's part of the journey of actually learning to say no to those situations, no to those energies, in a very polite, humble way. Like, yeah,
Well, you have to.
you guys go and do this. This is great. If this is what you feel, but for me, it's not where I want to be today.
Sometimes you don't know until you're already in that situation that
In
you're in
which
the
case,
company.
also,
And then you
have
have
the
to tap
courage
into
to
your
excuse yourself,
that's the embarrassing moment. You have to tap into the intuition, be like, okay, got to get away from my in-laws. It's like, no, maybe it's not so bad. Um, and so then as far as the purity signal goes, like that yogi guru model, like I totally appreciate it at a level that I couldn't have just say 5, 6 years ago.
Mhm.
I understand why they would young kids, for example, whose parents thought that they had spiritual potential would send them to be in the proximity, like the ashrams or the Hermitage and the different spiritual schools, but to actually be there.
Yeah,
And the added benefit, of course, is that if you really are in the company of somebody who's done the work and moved down the path, in all likelihood, they'll be the wonderful mirror to hold up to you the awareness piece of your low vibrational tendencies.
and this actually is part of the spiritual search, consciously or unconsciously, of searching for as you said, for the master or for the guru. It's
Yeah.
also part of the initiation process, which has been lost a lot in modern society. But you see that even in a lower vibration, even in a inverted and perverted way, these initiations still take place in
Yeah, and
in fraternities, in universities. They take place in gangs on the street with selling drugs and initiations.
they're just
And you can see that the initiation into that is an energy that's already indoctrinating you into some very, very negative, dark.
the darkened path.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so this is the same concept. It doesn't necessarily, I don't really, I don't, like the guru is itself has been terribly infiltrated over the years because you have so
yeah.
many false prophets and you have so many material gurus who are big personalities but are otherwise not actually of purity. So their teachings are not carrying the right vibration and they don't really go anywhere.
Because
Um,
sometimes you see with some of them that actually what they're promoting and what they're supporting are not really aligned with the spiritual values that
well,
you know,
that they speak of, but that they haven't arrived to.
they haven't arrived to. You see, various some so-called spiritual leaders and spiritual teachers that talking a lot of very, very beautiful things, and it's not like that actually what they're talking about is wrong or anything. But then you see them aligned with a lot of
So,
various, shall we say, global corporate environments
well,
that are not actually aligned with what they are teaching.
what the litmus test was during COVID. They either went silent or they were in favor of medical experimentation on the masses.
Yeah,
And that was a dead giveaway that they weren't of purity.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
And you can also see, numbers who've also been associated with Davos and the World Economic Forum and various things like this, where it's like, and the thing is, they're not going there speaking out against these people, which is, if you were being authentic with your higher self, is you would be using that opportunity to stir the waters and reveal some
you'd use
truth.
your platform to move people down a path
Yeah,
of divine unity.
exactly.
Not
Whereas actually
not
they're invited to that platform and they just actually integrate themselves into that field of energy.
And so then the last point that I would make as far as the purity signal goes is that you can connect with a purity signal that's non-physical.
Yes.
And this comes to people, sometimes it happens actually more often than we realize. Just most of the people who have found their purity signal, oftentimes through channeling, or sometimes they end up opening up to just an inflow of information, but they're actually receiving that information from a source that's deliberately using the information as the lure to raise their vibration.
Yeah. And the thing is, you can see that the people who have connected to a non-embodied purity signal, or let's say a non-embodied guru, because that's also, essentially what it can be, or a more elevated consciousness or elevated being. Again, you see with a lot of these, when it's authentic, they suddenly no longer need to search for anything, and they follow a very authentic, higher vibration in everything they do.
Yeah, well,
And again, there is a litmus test, even with, with all of these things.
with all of these things,
Yeah,
all these things, because for every one person who has found themselves in a high vibrational channeling environment, there's another 100 or maybe even 1,000 people
of course.
who may be talking to something coming through, but
And
but it's not necessarily of a high vibration.
one of the most interesting things about the spiritual teachings also is when they speak about authentic spiritual masters, authentic gurus, if you like. It's like, and the question is what is a guru trying to achieve? Actually, a guru doesn't want disciples. Guru is here to create new masters. A spiritual master came to create new masters to carry on the
The,
lineage, to carry
uh,
on the teaching. And of course, the path towards mastery is also filled with lots of pitfalls and imperfections because there are things you on your journey, me on my journey, every human being on their journey. It is the path to mastery. The end of the spiritual journey is a certain mastery of consciousness. And along that way, you will have to confront all of the impurities. Now,
yeah,
there are a lot of people, again, where the false identity, the ego identity kicks in and who can very easily set themselves up to be, how to say, gurus for a world that is still trapped within the savior complex.
they usually go quiet. They sit there in their own peaceful, blissed out state of realization, knowing that the best they can do often is just hold a vibration until
Exactly, the
there are
authentic
those,
ones, the authentic
yeah,
ones. Yeah. The authentic ones, it's like that if they have two disciples, if they have two people following their teachings, it's enough.
Fine. It's or even if they have one person.
And even if they have one person, it's because who is coming is meant to be coming. But the thing is, they have such how to say, an electrifying and magnifying force that it does it's very powerfully calling anyway.
Yeah, well, many of them ultimately are, as we said earlier, will just hold the vibration without needing a disciple.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
raising the vibration for those around them
yeah,
without necessarily emanating any words.
yes,
There are many examples of these, profound meditators who are just sitting in a state of perfect stillness, and they would collect an audience who just wanted to be in proximity.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. I mean,
You could,
Babaji is a very famous one in the yogi tradition.
yeah, you could just feel something special just being in proximity.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's my first one is to if this young, seeker came to me and was looking for guidance, I would say consider a purity signal, whether in form or through digital means or through the non-physical. I think it's incredibly important to strengthen that source connection so that the light of your being can start to enter
Hmm.
without the infiltration. And then the second thing would be actually very similar, but the second thing is actually very similar to what you were saying, and that is that everything, everything is a vibration. Like all is a vibration. We think of ourselves as physical beings and we operate through the senses, but every molecule within every part of creation is simply vibrating. And that vibration can be neutral, but oftentimes, as it relates to our human experience, our vibrations are either mostly high or low. And our primary energy centers as humans would be our thoughts and feelings, our words, and our actions.
Hmm.
And so the next thing that I would advise this young seeker is to say your journey is to grow aware of your thoughts and feelings, which lead to your words and actions. And simply ask yourself, is the vibration high or low of these emanations? And if it's low, then why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And so that journey into the awakened self is as much about releasing or um, it's decomposing, if you will, the not self, the false self, the identified low vibrational egoic self that has been oftentimes reinforced so many times over from the moment you arrived until that moment that you start to feel that call into the conscious self. And it's really the perpetual work that you spoke of. It's that daily effort because the ego is a monster. The mind will do everything it can to obfuscate and deflect and take no responsibility for its low vibrational expressions, and combined with its inability to even see itself, usually has these low vibrational qualities deeply entrenched for a very long time. Even though some of the most ascended masters still have low vibrational expressions of their human self that sneak up every so often.
Yeah, absolutely. There were masters who smoked, various, areas of, shall we say, their human incarnation, preferences and various things. But yeah, this journey of how to say becoming more and more aware of your choices and your actions in every moment is actually that's what leads you to realize that through the choices we make of actually how much we can become fully integrated and conscious into life and actually live it in its richness and fulfillment.
Well, and that's the beautiful byproduct of it is that when you start to transcend those low vibrational qualities, which is to say the guilt and the fear and the apathy and the grief and the desire and the anger and the pride and all these different energies, when you start to fully move beyond those selfish low vibrational expressions, the byproduct is a more joyous, more loving reality.
Yeah,
You are rewarded at some point. A sad saint is still a sad saint. So you still have to make sure that there's joy as part of your focal point throughout your life.
yeah.
But when those low vibrational qualities are gone, your relationships will more naturally experience peace and love and joy
You
and all.
become you become more detached to the human condition because the exterior environment is always going to be the same. It's like you're Alan on your spiritual journey. At some time, at some point along this journey, loved ones are going to leave you. You know,
Yeah, well,
People are going to pass from the physical plane. That the human experience of, it's just that we don't, when we start to live it more in the present moment, we actually are able to kind of embrace that. Okay, now I can fully have this experience, but that experience doesn't drag me downwards or keep me, because actually I can connect this experience into a kind of greater reality and understanding of, let's say, cosmic life.
yeah. And even if I can't understand why I'm having this experience in this moment, I'm not going to judge it. I'm just going to experience it and neither accept nor reject, not put a positive or negative spin on it, just move through this experience.
And this is the deeper path of self-knowledge, of actually realizing that, everybody, it doesn't matter what level of consciousness incarnated on this planet in this human form, will go through these successions of experiences in one way or another,
Another, yeah,
and
at some
everything
point.
passes.
And eventually you arrive at that place where you're just in pure acceptance for it. And you start to see it in elderly people even. They stop battling so much. They just moved
Yeah.
into a more
And you
tranquil,
see that
peaceful
they become
reality
actually more free and more childlike at a certain stage
of their
shall
life.
we say,
Yeah,
aging.
more joyous in that reality. And so
Because they let
this
go. They let
this
go. Like, what's the point of worrying about all of this? Because, I've only got 5 years left, 10 years left. It's like, make the most of it.
yeah, and their perspective has changed and a lot of those enslaving qualities have broken away at that point, because the things that they thought would bring joy, like career or financial means or even marriage and children, they went through those experiences and they realized that they just came back to themselves anyways.
Yeah.
That the external, although the experience can be a joyous one, the joy still needed to come from within for those experiences to be most fulfilling.
Yeah. And I think, that's really the awareness of that journey, is actually realizing that every experience is actually really only there to help you go deeper into self-knowledge.
I know, you know,
And that acceptance of, it's
it's
also
that,
one of
that
the things we always say is, like, when starting the spiritual journey, accept where you are now. Because a
yeah,
lot of people come and they're going like, I want to be a saint, or
or or
I
or
want to be a great yogi,
or I
I,
just want to find
or I want
meaning
to
and
have
purpose in my life.
superpowers. I
Yeah,
want to have
like I
superpowers. And it's like,
or yeah, anything that orients around you thinking you know where you're supposed to be.
exactly. And you can see that always that is an exterior projection somewhere in time in the future. you
Yeah,
know. And
it's
it's
not.
like, okay, I be here now. Like, yeah, okay, today I'm tired. Today I have a cold. You're
It's
still on your spiritual path. It's good. Take care of the cold. It's here now. Take care of it.
I can say as a moment of commiseration, the waiting can be very hard when you're on this journey
Absolutely.
because you're
You,
like,
you, but
man,
you see the building of qualities, perseverance, patience, these little things, these little gifts that come to us. And also even the realization that we start to learn more and we have more techniques and we have more methods. We're able to go through these things easier and find alternative solutions for it, which actually, in a way, brings a kind of corresponding joy in that experience, the exploration of what's happening with me right now.
it gets easier over time.
Yeah.
It all gets much easier over time. The first few steps are doozies, but then it starts to get easier.
It gets easier the greater you're able to keep your consciousness on the experience you're having.
Well, that's the presence.
That's the presence. You have to be present in the experience, because you
Otherwise,
know
you're
this
carried
is what
off.
happens with a lot of people. For example, it's like, if you're not aware of what's happening to you in your life, what's happening around you, and you get lots of little signals. You get them as little illnesses, you get them as funny feelings inside, you get them as aches or pains in the body, you get them as somebody saying something to you, and you don't take care of those things because you're not aware. And eventually it just builds up until it just explodes into a big, ugly, chaotic mess. The elephant in the room, the great big steaming pile of poop
Yeah.
that you have no choice but to deal with.
It,
Whereas if you're conscious in every moment to, like, okay, right now, what's happening now? This is where I am now. I'm tired. Okay, then have I been sat too long in front of the computer? Have I been sat talking for too long? I need to go stretch. I need to go drink some water. I need, and it's like, and you feel into what the need is and what the awareness is. And you take care of all of these little micro things before they get big.
well,
And life
and
is
and
just
that
flowing.
And that's the balance is what you're speaking to.
That's the balance. Yeah.
Sometimes you actually disregard the micro things because then otherwise you spend too much time just dealing with the micro and you lose the bigger picture. Other times you have to back away from the bigger picture because the bigger picture is not serving you and you have to go into the micro.
Yeah.
And you having the
That's the,
judgment and the discernment is actually the last point that I wanted to bring up on this part of the journey, which is to say, move into the habit of calling for help.
mhm.
Like there's much wisdom, guidance, understanding that is available to you. You're not alone on this journey. At times you may believe you're alone, and the enslaved mind will keep telling you that you're alone.
And there will be certain moments on the journey where you're not truly alone, but you will feel alone.
And
Yeah.
that's for a reason.
And
But
that's for a reason, because you have something that's very unique to you that you have to transform. And again, that's also part of a breaking down of certain patterns of consciousness we have, where we want a lot of the time someone else to do the transformation for us.
right. And so when you come to the realization that the responsibility for your journey is yours and yours alone,
Yeah.
and that you can certainly surround yourself with other seekers who can be a support, and you can find those who are ahead of you who can be a motivator or a guide or a guru, whatever.
Yeah,
Gurus,
they're an example. They're an
they're
example.
just
They
an
inspire
example
you.
and they can
They
help you.
inspire you through their example.
But it doesn't change that humility and gratitude will keep you connected to the infinite creator.
Absolutely.
And so if you can invoke those energies while calling for help when you feel stuck or aimless or without otherwise a clear degree of motivation to keep you going, then
Mhm.
I believe that that is the right approach to getting through some of the difficult times.
Yeah, I mean, there are, how to say, a number of qualities. I mean, that's the thing. We have to build virtues, build qualities. There are certain qualities and virtues we would say of a spiritual being. You know, and definitely humbleness, gratitude can be counted among those.
Humility and gratitude are one and two on remaining, in my experience, on remaining connected,
Yeah.
because those are the neutralizing forces to the mind.
Humility is a great neutralizing force for the false identity,
Yeah, everything.
and gratitude also, you know.
Yeah, and this journey is so, in itself, the journey is humbling. If you're actually progressing healthily, you'll know because you're growing more humble.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of you moving down this path, you're like, holy crap, I am so insignificant and I know absolutely nothing. And all the
Mhm.
while, you may know much more than anybody else around you, and yet you know nothing. And
You
you're a
know nothing.
temporary expression of creation that will be gone like a fart in the wind, and you'll be forgotten afterwards.
And this is always the sign of an authentic teacher, an authentic master, is that their state of humbleness.
Yeah, they're not any better or any different from anybody else. They're just operating on their own frequency, expressing themselves as intended.
Mhm. And just realizing their part as a, shall we say, an individual spark, an individual atom in this cosmic or macrocosmic play, you know, and they're
Yeah,
just a small part in the
they're a thread in the grand tapestry.
exactly,
So then the
exactly.
last point that I would bring to that disciple is to say you really want to absorb, for lack of a better word, pure love.
Yeah.
And the pure love refers to the purity of your being, which is available in endless abundance, should you choose to bring it in.
And that in itself, I think that's a topic I think we pick up in the next
And we can explore it further. But and they
because
would say, well,
there's the
how do I absorb pure love? It says, well, that aspect of you is existing in a state of stillness.
yeah,
It is an open, bright stillness. And you are not separate from it, but when your mind is overactive and or distracted, or the physical self is otherwise um, running around like a chicken with its head cut off, you're not going to be able to bring in that pure love as vigorously as intended.
absolutely, yeah, because again, the false identity or the ego identity and the conditioning we have around the idea of love at the human level is really quite misaligned and deviated in vibration from pure love a lot of the time.
And
I
so
think
that's
I
why
think that's a great subject actually for our next talk.
we'll have it next time. So that's and we can wrap up here anyways. It's a good point to complete, but that's why I would always recommend somebody coming into my space to arrive at that place of mastery of stillness.
Yeah.
It has to be part from what I know, I don't know anybody who's arrived at that ascended level. I'm sure it's possible without an element of stillness governing their journey, which is to say
And
that on a regular basis, you are able to quiet the mind and allow for that pure love vibration just to flood in.
yeah, it's characteristic. Exactly as you said, whether it's the state of detachment or centering or void or pure love, it's just a space actually where you just take the time to be very, very deeply connected into your higher self or your supreme self, the Atman consciousness, and yeah, and from there, you can say connecting to source is also an immensely regenerating space. And then we get into a whole kind of another area of investigation of actually understanding
The benefits of it. This is a good
the
conversation.
holographic principle of creation.
Well, instead of having to do so much work on trying to overcome the egoic self, just by virtue of you absorbing more of your purity,
Yeah,
the ego dissolves away.
dissolves away. Yeah, in the immensity of those macrocosmic energies.
Yeah, all the traumas, the abuse frequencies, a lot of those low vibrational stuck energies, they actually purify off as part of that process.
They do. The more that ego consciousness becomes, let's say, transparent, and we're actually able to have a vision upon our true nature, our essential nature,
Yeah,
then
you don't even have to see it for what it is. It actually is illuminated for you. As you embody more of the consciousness is doing the work essentially. You just become a vehicle that expresses it.
exactly. And you see, this is why in spiritual tradition, ignorance is always associated with darkness. And you
Yeah.
burn away the darkness, you burn away the ignorance by bringing light into it.
And the light does the work.
Yeah,
Actually, you can allow God to just do the work.
absolutely.
That's what you're
Yeah.
doing in that state of stillness.
Yeah.
It's very good. Benedict,
Great realization of that. The final thing is that yeah, God is always doing the work because all the experiences we have, which even right now we might be labeling and categorizing as bad, are still essential
that's
experiences
just
for our transformation and spiritual awakening.
and that's why it's easy for the mind to say good or bad. Somebody's aligned or they're learning their lessons. They're not learning their lessons. They need to do this. They should do that. That's most of that is just the mind interfering with the natural order and the progression as intended.
And that's why I think it's like anybody who comes, it's like exactly that, one step at a time, dealing with whatever is the biggest priority right now.
Yeah, what's in front of you in this moment.
Yeah, be in the moment.
And then bon chance. Good luck. Hope it all works out.
Well, one way or another, it's also that thing is like even the realization is like, yes, sometimes the difficulties can take some months, some years to pass through. I mean,
Ah,
we
so
had
true.
how long was it? 2 years of COVID difficulties to pass through
Longer.
as a species, as a human race.
Yeah, longer in some places.
Powerfully transforming.
I know, but look at how much awakening happened through that period.
Absolutely, you see. So this is the thing when you start to have that perspective, you realize actually there isn't a negativity as such. It's just a perspective.
I totally agree.